Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line here on TVP World, where we break down some of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. As the world awaits the outcome of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska on Friday, Russia appears to be juggling its own economic challenges. In July, the country's grain exports had dropped to a 17-year low. What lies ahead for Russia and its agriculture? Konrad Gorlinski tells us more.
In a bid to keep its spot as the world's top wheat exporter, Russia is moving to shore up its agricultural export performance after sales plunged last month to their lowest July level since 2008. Consulting firm Sovecon puts July exports at between 2 and 2.5 million tons, compared to 3.67 million a year ago. Rail operator Rusagrotrans gives a slightly higher range, 2.4 to 2.6 million tons, citing slow harvesting and low carryover stocks.
The agricultural production and exports of agricultural products, this is a huge part of Russian economy overall.
Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Patrushev has ordered agriculture officials to take timely measures to keep exports on target, in line with President Vladimir Putin's goal of boosting exports 50% by 2030. So what's happening here? Harvest delays have been a major factor. The Agriculture Ministry says crops have been collected from an area 60% smaller than this time last year, after poor weather pushed the campaign back.
De la Sociedad Rural Argentina.
While Russia struggles with drought, other countries like Canada, the US, and Argentina, which just lowered its export taxes, are having great years pushing global prices down. Coupled with a strong ruble, these headwinds are squeezing out Russian farmers' profitability.
The Russian farmers, they are reluctant to sell under these lower prices. But again, these prices are set by global players, not by Russia itself. And overproduction in other countries doesn't help. And so they are still waiting.
Shortages at Black Sea ports have left some vessels idle for weeks, forcing shippers to pay costly demurrage fees. Traders call it a classic short squeeze. Contract signed, ships waiting, but no grain to load. The question now, can Russian farmers deliver in time to keep President Vladimir Putin's ambitious exports targets on track? Russia's Institute for Agricultural Market Studies says they can. They expect exports to steady within a week as fresh wheat harvests hit the market. Adding a small tailwind, Russia's grain export tax, long a major irritant for farmers, dropped to zero last week on weaker prices, a shift that could finally induce them to resell their stored wheat to market. So despite this midsummer hiccup, Moscow still forecasts its 2025 grain harvest to end 4% up at 135 million tons, with wheat exports rising to 45 million tons from 44 million last season. Whether Moscow's push can stop the July slide comes down to three things: the weather, the price farmers will take, and how fast grain hits the ports. All make or break for Russia's grip on global wheat.
The headline numbers are indeed attention-grabbing. Paired with high inflation numbers and interest rates, a bottomless war chest, Ukraine's pummeling Russian refineries, the world has been expecting the collapse of Russia for months. And yet, it's not happened. Here with us today to discuss the details is Sergey Vakulenko, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, pleasure is mine.
So last month, we saw a headline that Russian grain exports dropped to a 17-year low in July, sounding alarm bells. But was it just a catchy headline? When we look at the numbers, we see that export forecast for 2024-2025 season is not much lower than the average for 2019 to 2023. We have a visual here to illustrate that a little bit more clearly. What are your thoughts on that?
The harvest is just going. I think they harvested roughly half of the grain-bearing terrain in Russia. And by the numbers I see, they've collected about 2% more than last season. So it looks like there might be a slowdown or weather-induced delays to harvesting season in July. But by now, Russian agriculture seems to have caught up. So don't think there are any grounds for worrying or celebration for some.
That's very interesting. Russia's deputy prime minister has actually ordered to take the necessary measures to get the numbers right. So it suggests that the country does have the capacity, and Putin has also ordered the government to increase exports by 50% by 2030. And I can't help but ask, especially given that headline that we just discussed, how will this year's numbers be boosted?
Again, looks like there might be either clerical quirk, and it's becoming more and more difficult to understand precisely what's going on in the Russian economy, particularly soon after the fact, because much larger share of Russian statistics on the economy is getting closed, hidden since the beginning of the war. 3 years ago, it was quite transparent. By now, more and more indicators are becoming hidden, not to the levels like it was 40 years ago during Soviet times, but it becomes difficult. Sometimes they're shooting themselves in the foot by hiding the numbers that are used by other branches of government and companies and market participants to plan or adjust their activities. So maybe they're just a glitch. Of course, export numbers is something that you can fiddle with. That's what's reported by outside actors. But then again, grain harvest is something that's weather-induced, season-induced. So we got to count the chicken by the time they roost. And I think this year it's a bit early. What exactly was Putin demanding from his statistics people, from his agriculture minister, is hard to say. And the plans for 5 years from now, it's even more difficult to say because, to be honest, I think nobody in Russian government plans in all earnesty what's going to happen 5 years from now. I think they're living hand to mouth and try to survive next year or two, and then figure out how things will be after the war is over.
You mentioned that there is some lack of transparency in regards to various statistics and data available in Russia, especially in comparison to what was available a few years ago. Can you give us some examples of that?
Oh, there are a zillion of them. In the area that's close to my heart, Russia has hidden its oil production figures. Russia has hidden the amount of gasoline and diesel and producers and so on and so forth. A lot of demographic numbers have been hidden, and it's going on. So experts like myself have to use triangulation techniques, and I probably wouldn't be telling what I'm using, because otherwise Russian statistics will close another indicator that becomes useful. But they are headline numbers. And of course, sometimes it just doesn't work because Russia has to report its oil production to OPEC, and then OPEC discloses it.
Okay.
But they try.
Sure. And I just wanted to go back to the grain issue. What about the broader issue of Russia stealing Ukrainian grain and using it to boost its agricultural output? We know that last year Russia boosted its grain output with grain crops from the Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory of Luhansk. And Ukraine considers this grain to be stolen. But nonetheless, this stolen grain boosted Russian grain crops by about 4% in 2024. And this has actually been happening for years, since 2014. And I just wanted to bring up a quote here. Taking this season into account, we estimate that Russia has stolen 15 million tons of Ukrainian grain since the start of the full-scale war. This is coming from Ukraine's Deputy Economy Minister Taras Vyotsky. Excuse me for my pronunciation. He said that to Reuters. What are your thoughts on that in the context of this grain output in Russia?
There are two elements to it. One, there is indeed Ukrainian grain that was in storage elevators and like at the time of the invasion. That grain was definitely stolen. Another element is the new grain that's being grown on occupied territories. Some of this grain was indeed grown on Donetsk and Luhansk, and since 2014, Russia didn't recognize those territories as part of its territory until 2022. Before that, it was actually recognizing it as Ukrainian territories and separatist or regional rebels being in conflict with Ukraine. So I don't think Russia has been including that grain into its statistics. I'm quite certain that Donetsk and Luhansk didn't pay any dues, customs duties or what's not, to Ukrainian budget when they were exporting that grain between 2014 and 2022. Since 2022, indeed, that's vast black earth agricultural region, which used to be a part of breadbasket that Ukraine is. I wonder how much agricultural activity you can indeed have in that swath of land that goes along the north coast between Dnipro and Azov Sea. Considering the amount of mines, drones activities, and so on out there, and also problem with irrigation. Since Kakhovka Dam was exploded, the canals that were delivering water to that area gone dry. So that is an issue as well. But I'm quite certain that people, like everywhere else, are trying to survive and trying to live their lives as it were peaceful times. So yes, they do what they used to. They try to sow, they try to harvest. So some grain is coming from that area, and now Russia is including it in its statistics because it says, no, that's part of Russian territory, the new regions. Interesting enough, Rosstat, the statistical agency, publishes its statistics for Russian Federation and Russian Federation within the borders of 2022. So you can always see the distinction.
Okay. I want to move on to oil now. We know that Ukraine has recently attacked Russian oil refineries, which are allegedly key to the Russian war effort. But it hasn't made a difference to the Russian war effort. Let's bring up a visual for our viewers, and we see the facilities here. The pronunciation, I think you might have to help me here. Ryazan, Novokuybishevsk.
Novokuybishevsk.
Thank you very much. Volgorad and Afipsky. Has it made a difference, these attacks? Have they made a difference to the ongoing aggression of Russia upon Ukraine?
It's very hard to tell at the moment because Volgograd, the largest of them, of those four, and the best equipped, most modernized of these four, has been attacked, I think this morning or yesterday, something like that. Afipsky is a small and poorly equipped refinery. It's very close to Ukraine territory, so it's a favorite target for Ukrainian drone operators. Is just easy to attack, but it's pretty much irrelevant. Ryazan is important for supplying Moscow, but Moscow is being supplied by at least 4 other refineries, and I think Ukrainians managed to down or disable one of the 2 major refining columns in Ryazan, so Ryazan has halved its processing capacity. But so far, this is a pale image of what was going on roughly a year ago in May till July of 2024. That was a strong concerted attack on Russian refinery sector as a whole. At some point, Ukrainians managed to turn off about 10% of Russian refining. That's a much less percentage so far. Russia refines 5 million barrels of oil per day while consuming roughly 2 million barrels of oil products a day. So there is a huge margin, well, that's different amongst different products. So there's a huge surplus of diesel and about 10-15% surplus of gasoline. But last year, Ukraine didn't manage to create a proper shortage of fuels in Russia, and definitely didn't manage to create a shortage for the military effort that Russia was conducting in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So I think so far it's a very far cry from a fuel shortage for Russian military effort. And also the nature of military activity these days is such that fuel is probably not the most crucial element in it. It's not a situation where you see thousands of tanks rolling 100 miles per day and burning huge amount of diesel. That's not the situation. That's not how this war is being conducted these days.
And what about the war effort in general? What state is it in, to the best of your knowledge?
The news past week haven't been extremely favorable to Ukraine. Seems like Russia has managed to breach on a small part of the front, but Russia breached the main defenses. And if you look at the map, there is a rather threatening salient in the front towards Pokrovsk. So that was a bastion of Ukrainian defense halfway, well, at the middle between Donetsk and Zaporizhia region. So, and if that falls, there are no major defense lines between Kramatorsk and Slaviansk, the centers of Donetsk region that's still in Ukrainian hands, and Russian troops. That's a developing situation. As far as I know, Ukraine is redeploying part of its stormtroops, Azov, former Azov brigade, to counter that breakthrough. It's unclear whether Russia would manage to widen that salient and break through, but so far Ukraine was on its back foot for past week or two. And well, that was a breakthrough, and for the last 6 months at least, there was steady pressure from Russia on Ukraine, which led to steady increase in occupied territory. So this attrition war wasn't really going in Ukrainian favor.
And as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you that as we await the outcome of the Putin-Trump summit in Alaska, how might the de-escalation of the war, some form of ceasefire, impact the Russian economy? After all, this has been the focus of the government for the last 4 years.
There are conflicting views of what exactly Putin is going to ask there. Rumors are that he might ask for lifting of sanctions on aviation sector and probably on banking sector, because Russia does have certain difficulties keeping its civil aviation flying, getting parts, getting airplanes serviced and like. And if certain sanctions against banks are lifted, this would also make it easier for Russian economy to operate its export and import operations. Of course, the focus these days is on land demands, what Putin will be demanding, and he will be demanding in Anchorage, what would be the land area and like demands that Russia might be having, what it would be willing to give back.
There is some word that if the Trump-Putin negotiations were to provide Russia with access to Ukrainian land with rare earth minerals, how would that impact the Russian economy? And do you even think that that is a possible option?
Rare earth minerals are really hot air these days, and I think that's what it is. Rare earth minerals, they're not particularly rare, and the reason why they're rare, it's a dirty and expensive business to extract them. And that's the reason why much of this mining and enrichment and refinement happens in China, because other countries just don't want to do it. So yes, there are some mineral reserves of various rare earth in Ukraine. I don't think that Soviet or Russian industry has been particularly interested in it. And there are never forays from Russian non-ferrous metals companies, like Norilsk Nickel, for example, into those deposits, say, before 2013. There's about 30 years between the breakup of Soviet Union and the beginning of hostilities and tensions between Russia and Ukraine. During those 30 years, many Russian companies, they bought refineries, grain operations, other businesses in Ukraine, but there's precious little interest to this rare earth. I don't see anything is going to change now. So that's just a figure of speech of mine, in my opinion.
Okay, Sergey Vakulenko, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine. See you soon.
And that concludes The Bottom Line for today. I was your host, Marie Cato. We bring you the best of regional business Monday to Friday at 5:10 CET on TVP World. And in the meantime, for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. Goodbye.